I have been to a good many memorial concerts in my 78 years, some moving, some merely correct. But I will go to my grave carrying the evening they let the tuner's daughter play. It was the autumn after Alderton Recital Hall lost its composer in residence, a man named Voss, whose work I had admired for 30 years. The memorial had been planned by the conservatory's director, a man called Hartwell, correct in his suits, impeccable in his condescension, and the program was exactly what you would expect. Two faculty soloists, a string quartet performing an early Voss nocturne, brief remarks, polite wine afterward. The hall held perhaps 120 people. I sat in the third row, to the left, where I had sat at every event in that building since they laid the floor. Beside me was the hall's chief patron, Bertram, a retired glove manufacturer who had known Voss almost as long as I had, and who spent the first quarter of the evening whispering that the quartet was playing the nocturne at entirely the wrong tempo. Voss's widow, Marguerite, sat in the front row, center. She was a small woman with white hair piled carefully, and she had barely moved since the evening began. She had been Voss's only audience for 40 years of morning practice, and whatever she was feeling, she was keeping it behind her eyes. Hartwell took the podium between the quartet and the second soloist. He had a way of calling attention to himself that I had never liked, a half pause before speaking, as though the room owed him its breath. He spoke briefly about Voss's legacy, his catalog, the commissions that would bear his name, competent, bloodless. Then he said, almost as an aside, that they had a short interlude before the second half, something informal, a young person who studied informally with the late maestro's circle. He smiled as he said it, the way men smile when they are about to be generous with someone else's time. Clara Finch, he said, the daughter of our hall tuner, she'll play something brief. I heard Bertram exhale beside me. A girl came out from the side entrance. She was 13, perhaps, slight, in a dark green dress that was clearly her best and clearly her mother's doing, the hem sitting just below her knees, her dark hair pinned back with more care than precision. She walked to the piano with the stillness of someone who has learned not to look at the audience. Hartwell was already stepping away. He said it quietly. But the hall has excellent acoustics, and I was close enough. Tuner's daughter, he murmured to his colleague at the side of the stage. Keep it short. Something simple. He said it the way you'd say, don't worry. It won't come to much. The girl sat down. She adjusted the bench in one smooth motion, the way someone does who has sat at this piano many times, which I realized later she had. Her father had tuned that Steinway every month for 11 years. She had grown up beside it. For a moment she was still. Her hands rested on her knees. Then she set them on the keys and began. The opening bars were so quiet that several people in the back rows did not, I think, realize she had started. A melody in the right hand, spare, unhurried, built from intervals of a fourth and a fifth, ascending by half steps with a patience that made the music feel as though it had been resting somewhere for years and had only now been allowed out. The left hand lay beneath it like a heartbeat, low and even, nothing showy, nothing meant to announce itself. But something happened to the room very quickly. I noticed Bertram straighten beside me. I noticed the cellist in the quartet, still seated to the right of the stage, turn his head, and I noticed Marguerite Voss, in the front row, go entirely still in a way that was different from the stillness she had held all evening. Her hands, which had been folded in her lap, came apart. The melody turned. It found a new phrase, a question rising, and the answer came lower, warmer, the kind of resolution that doesn't close the door but opens a window. I understood with a certainty that arrived all at once. This was not a piece I had ever heard performed. It was familiar in the way that faces in old photographs are familiar, not because you have seen them, but because you recognize something in the shape of them. Voss had played me fragments. Years ago, in the late evenings after long rehearsals, when the hall was empty and he would sit at this same piano and work through ideas that had not yet become pieces. One of them had this question and answer shape. I had asked him once what it was. He had only said, something I am trying to finish. He had never finished it. The girl was playing it now. She played it whole, or rather she played it as wholly as anything incomplete can be played, which is to say she played it with the understanding of someone who knows exactly where its edges are and has decided that the edges are not the point. The melody that had opened quietly was building now, not loudly, but with the accumulation of something sure of itself. A second phrase entered in the left hand, a counter melody, and the two voices began to move around each other in the way that Voss had always written at his best, as a conversation between equals, each deferring, neither yielding. I was aware, distantly, that Hartwell had stopped moving at the side of the stage. Then the girl did something I had not anticipated. The farewell melody, still present, still the spine of everything, began to draw on something older, a pattern in the right hand that I recognized within 2 bars. The opening of the Schubert Impromptu in A-flat, Op 90, the second, not quoted, not copied, folded in, the way one voice folds into another when they share a harmonic understanding. It took me a moment to understand why she had chosen it, and when I did, the back of my neck went cold in the best possible way. Voss's last request of her father the week before he died had been to have the hall piano tuned before a concert at which that Schubert would be performed. He had wanted to hear it one last time from the audience. He had not made it to the concert. She knew that. Someone had told her, or she had understood it herself, and she had woven it in. The old piece that he had wanted and could not reach carried home inside the new one that he had never finished. And she had finished for him. Marguerite Voss pressed her fingers to her mouth. The performance was perhaps 8 minutes in total. Near the end, the two melodies separated again. Schubert released, the farewell melody finding its own resolution, not a grand arrival, but a settling, the way a long letter ends, not with a flourish, but with a name signed quietly. The final chord was simple. 3 notes, low, held long. Clara let it decay until the room itself was the instrument, resonating, then silence. Not the silence before applause. The other silence, the one that means the room has forgotten to breathe. It lasted long enough that I counted, not deliberately, but I found afterward that I had 4 full seconds. In a concert hall, 4 seconds of true silence is an age. Then Marguerite Voss rose to her feet. She was a small woman, as I said, and she was not young, and I do not think she planned it. She simply stood. The way you stand when your body knows before you do that sitting is no longer adequate. And then the cellist stood, still holding his bow, and Bertram beside me stood. He was not a man given to demonstrations, and then the room stood, and the sound that followed was not the polite applause that had greeted the quartet. It was the real thing. Clara sat at the piano with her hands, still resting on the keys for a moment. Then she lifted them and looked at the room, as though she were seeing it for the first time, which in a sense she was. Hartwell was applauding with everyone else, his face a study in recalibration. I did not watch him for long. Afterward, in the foyer, Marguerite Voss found the girl and took both her hands. I was near enough to hear what she said. She asked Clara where she had learned the piece. Clara said she had found pages in the tuning kit. The leather folio her father brought to every session. Voss had given them to him, she thought, without meaning to. Just tucked them in the kit one morning, perhaps thinking he would retrieve them. He had died 8 days later. Her father had found them, had not known what to do with them, had set them on the piano at home. She had learned them from the pages. Marguerite listened to all of this with her hands around the girls, and then she said quietly, "He would have wanted you to have them." I drove home, alone that night, later than I had intended. The city was quiet. I kept the radio off. I have thought about that evening many times since. Not about Hartwell, and not about the applause. I think about the 4 seconds of silence, and Marguerite on her feet, and a 13-year-old girl who looked at the edges of an unfinished thing and understood that they were not the point. Some music is written for the person it will outlive. She understood that before the rest of us did. She just needed 8 minutes to prove it,